Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're going to be learning Daf Maseches Pesachim Daf Ayin Chesem Beis, starting at the Mishnah, about 10 lines or so from the top of the page, and we'll be learning in Yirtzeh Hashem all of Daf Ayin Tes, and we'll be caught up by the end of the night. This Mishnah speaks about a chiddush, something that's unique within the world of Korban Pesach, and that is the link between the status of the meat as to whether or not it's tamei or tahor, and whether or not zrikas hadam is appropriate, and then a couple of very practical conversations will ensue. Here we go. Ayin Chesem Beis, 10 lines down. New Mishnah. Nitma basar v'chelev kayam. If the meat of the Korban Pesach becomes tamei, but the chelev is still tahor, eino zorekas hadam. You're not allowed to do zrikas hadam if the Korban Pesach meat is tamei. What about the reverse? We saw this quoted yesterday in an ancillary form, but this is its actual appropriate place. What about a different case of nitma hachelev? What if the chelev became tamei, but the basar was kayam? In that case, says the Mishnah, zorek es hadam. So from the reish of the Mishnah, we see a very clear link between the status of the meat and whether or not zrikas hadam is allowed as it relates to the Korban Pesach. However, in contrast to Korban Pesach, uvemukdashin, by other korbanos that are brought, eino kain. The rules are not exactly the same. What are the rules by other korbanos? Even in a case where the meat is tamei and the chelev is kayam and the chelev is tahor, even there zorek es hadam. So that's a chiddush. That's a chiddush that we see in our Mishnah. That our Mishnah teaches us that when it comes to Korban Pesach, there's a link between the tuma status of a Korban Pesach, thereby not allowing for Zrikas Hadam for the Korban Pesach. Masha'enkin b'mukdashin, that is the case. Amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav, the Gemara opens 12, 13 lines down, Ayin Chesem and Beis. What does Rav Gidol Amar Rav say? Im zara kurza. That even though our Mishnah writes by a Korban Pesach that it has to be that the basar is tahor in order to do Zrikas Hadam. But if you actually go ahead and do the Zrikas Hadam when the meat is tamei, so then says Rav Gidol Amarav, hurtza, it's considered to be beritzui, it's considered to be an acceptable, Zrika. That's very strange because if you look in our Gemara doesn't seem to be lechatchila and b'di'eved. Our Gemara seems to be pretty practical and pretty direct. It seems to be what's allowed and what's not allowed. So we have to figure out what is Rav talking about and how did Rav know that our Mishnah meant only lechatchila, but b'di'eved, even if the Korban Pesach meat is tamei, that you can still do zrikas hadam. So asks the Gemara, v'haba'ina nachila. Wait a minute, Rav. You want to say that even if the meat is tamei, that it's still hurtza, even b'di'evet granted. But if you did the zrikas hadam, it's still hurtza, it's still beritzui. HaKadosh Baruch Hu still wants to have that zrikas hadam. But we learned many times over the last couple of weeks that v'ina nachila, that the Korban Pesach needs to be edible. So I don't understand. How can it be that you are going to say that b'di'evet, if you do the zrikas hadam when the meat is tamei, that it's hurtza, that the Korban Pesach is accepted, that the zrikas hadam is accepted, if no one can eat it because the meat is tamei? So says the Gemara, achila lo me'akva. The actual eating of the Korban Pesach is not me'akev. It doesn't hold back the actual kiyum of the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach. How can that be, Rav? Rav Gidol Amar Rav says that it works. That's not possible. The pasuk says, "Ish lefiach lo." It says that "Ish lefiach lo." Everybody has to eat. So you want to tell me that the basar is tamei and it's still going to work? But it says "Ish lefiach lo." Ish lefiach lo. Everybody has to eat the meat. Then how could basar tamei count? How does a zrikas hadam for basar tamei count? So answers the Gemara, lemitzvah. This is a phrase we'll see a number of times throughout Shas. Lemitzvah is basically another way of saying lechatchila. The right way to do it is to do it when the basar is in fact tahor. But if it's tamei b'di'eved, it's hurtza. Ula'akev lo. But are you really going to say that it's not me'akev? Hold on 1 second. V'atanya, we have a brisa that says 1/3 of the way down Ayin Chesem Beis. The brisa writes b'michsas. The pasuk says b'michsas. What's the pasuk talking about? It's michsas nefashos. Ish lefiach lo tachosu al haseh. So what does the pasuk mean when it says b'michsas? The brisa explains melamed she'ena pesach nishchat ela limnuyav, that the Korban Pesach cannot be slaughtered unless there are those who are committed to eating that particular korban, those who are appointed to that korban. So continues the Brisa, Yachol, maybe we should assume shechato shalolim nuyav, that if a shochet is shechting the korban Pesach and he wasn't doing it for the sake of those who are eating it, maybe we can assume that b'diavad yeheka over ala mitzvah v'kosher, that yes, he did it wrong, but it's still kosher. Talmud lomar ish lefi achlo tachosu. No, the pasuk doesn't allow for that. And hakasu shina alav le'akev. It seems from the pasuk, it seems very clear from the pasuk, actually, a great kasha and Rav. It seems very clear that there needs to be people who eat it. And not only is that true of the menuyav, of the people who are appointed to eat the korban, but then adds in the Gemara the key words that are the nail in the coffin against Rav here, or seemingly at least, the iskash ochlen lemenuyav. And we say the same thing about those who are eligible to eat the korban and those who are the appointees of the korban. So if the Brisa writes that if you do a korban Pesach and there are no appointees, there's no one slated to actually eat the korban Pesach, that the korban Pesach is going to be pasul, and the same is true by food. So then how can Rav say that our Mishnah allows for the Zrika Sadam when the meat is tamei? We see from a Brisa where it compares Ochlan to Menuyav that you can't do that. So a big kasha on Rav. So says the Gemara, El Rav, what's the precedent for Rav Shita? El Rav de Amar ki Reb Nasan. Rav holds like Reb Nasan. Reb Nasan, the Tana, what does he say? De Amar, Achilas Psachim lo me'akva, that the actual achil of the Psachim is not me'akev. Which shita of Reb Nasan is this? We're going to see two shitas. The first one will get rejected and the second will be embraced. Here is the first possibility. Hey, Reb Nasan, which Reb Nasan is Rav holding like? Again, review. Our Mishnah says that if meat is tamei, that you should not do Zrika Sadam. Rav in the Gemara says, don't worry. If you did Zrika Sadam b'diavad, it's kosher. Why does that make sense? It seems from the Brisa that it should be le'ikuva, that if you don't have edible food from the Korban Pesach, that it shouldn't work. Don't worry, Rav holds like Rav Nasan. Hey, Rav Nasan, almost halfway down. Ilema ha Rav Nasan. If you want to say it's Rav Nasan in the following Brisa, the Tanya, Rav Nasan Omer. What does Rav Nasan say? Minayin shekol Yisrael yotzin bepesach echad. How do we know that all of the Jews, millions of people, can be yotze with one Korban Pesach? That's impossible. As it relates to Achila, at least, that's impossible. You could do one Hakrava for everyone. We do that every day with a Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, Korban Tosh Ben Arbaim, Korban Musaf. We do Korban Asat Zibur all the time. But if you want to tell me, says the Brisa in the name of Rav Nasan, that you can do it for every person, how does that work? Talmud Lomar Ushchato V'Shachtu Oso Kol Kahal Adas Yisrael Ben Arbaim. You should shecht it for everyone. Asks the Gemara in the Brisa, V'Chichol HaKahal Shochtin. How can that be? V'Halo Ein Shochet Ela Echad. Not that many people can eat, and there's only one shochet. How can all of Klal Yisrael be yotze with one korban Pesach? Says the Gemara, Malamed shekol Yisrael yotzin bepesach echad. Everyone can be yotze in one korban Pesach. Now, if there are even 100 Jews, there's no way that everybody's getting a kizayis out of the small animal. Okay, that's just not possible. If there are millions of Jews, for sure that's true. What does that show you about the achila? That the achila is not ma'akev, and that's Rav Nasan. Says the Gemara, maybe this Rav Nasan is the source for Rav, the precedent, to say that when our Mishnah says that basar tamei, if basar becomes tamei, you can't do zrika sadam, and Rav says, yes, you can in the name of Rav Nasan. Maybe it's this Brisa. Says the Gemara, no. Dilma shiny hasam, maybe the Brisa that we just learned in the name of Rav Nasan is not a good source. Why not? The Gemara doesn't say this word explicitly, but it's very similar to the concept of hoil, the theoretical argument that allows for a loophole. What would be the theoretical argument here? That if 5 of the families would back off of being manui, of being appointed, then 5 new families come in, can be shaykh to the korban. And as well, the imam shechehani chazilahani, you can constantly cycle through people so that everyone is technically considered to be manui, and therefore it cannot be that brisa. Okay, very well. Says the Gemara halfway down, Elaha Rab Nasan. If it can't be the first Rab Nasan, then maybe it is the second one. The Tanya, Nimnu Alav Chabura Achas. Let's say that there was one Chabura, the Chazru v'Nimnu Alav Chabura Acheres, and then there was another Chabura of people who joined in. Rishonim Sheish Lahen Kizayis. The first people who ate a Kizayis were Yotze, Ochlen, Upturn Mila Asos, Pesach Sheni. That the Rishonim who were there, they got a kazayis, so they were yotzei the mitzvah, and they are pater from bringing another korban on Pesach Sheni. Achronim she'ein lahem kazayis, but the people who were late and didn't get the kazayis, so then ein ochlen v'chayavan lasos pesach sheni. Those people are not allowed to be yotze because they haven't eaten anything. This is all the Tanna Kama speaking, and they have to come back and bring the korban for Pesach sheni. That's all the Tanna Kama. What does Reb Nassan say?
That's not an excuse.
Not eating a kazayis? According to the Tanna Kama, it is.
What?
According to the Tanna Kama, he says everybody has to eat a kazayis.
You didn't get around to.
But that is right. But that seems to not be what's going on here. It's more like you're relying on one animal. It's not that you're not capable; it's that you're relying on one animal. But either way, the brisa here is focusing on the second shita, which is Reb Nassan Omer Elub turn milasos pesach shenish kvar nizrak hadam. This is fascinating. That Reb Nassan writes that even though not everyone is possibly going to eat, but because there was rikas hadam yotze. What does that show you? Achil is not me'akev. So this Rabbi Nassan works. So says the Gemara, why does this work? Akati, we could argue the same way we did in the first brisa with Rabbi Nassan. Maybe we could do this conceptual, theoretical hoil that maybe 5 people will leave the chabura, 5 will join, 5 will leave, 5 will join, 5 will leave, 5 will join until we get to all the millions of Jews. Maybe that will work. Says the Gemara, no. If you wanted to say that, in Cain, lisnei, then what should the second brisa have said? It should have said, why were all the Jews yotze? Because each of them could have had a piece. They could have had a theoretical piece at least, not achila mamish. What then did the brisa mean in the name of Reb Nassan that says, my shekvar nizrak hadam? What does it mean when it says nizrak hadam? Shma mina. What do we see from here by the fact that the brisa did not use the language of the fact that everyone was ra'ui limashech, that they could theoretically hoil, take a hand in the korban pesach, but rather Reb Nassan used the language of Kvar nizrak hadam shma mina bedam talya milsa. It's all dependent on the zrikas hadam aval achila lo me'akva. So now Rav has his precedent. Our Mishnah said that if basar's tameh, you should not be able to do zrikas hadam. Rav says b'di'eved you're yotzi. What's his mari makom? Rav Nassan. Very good. This brings us to 2/3 of the way down. Says the Gemara. Why was Rav going so far to retranslate our Mishnah? It's not the pashut pshat of our Mishnah. Asks the Gemara. 5-6 lines before the wide lines. My doche de Rav demokim la masnisan lichatchila the Reb Nassan to say that it's b'di'eved. Why did you understand the Mishnah that way, Rav? Our Mishnah b'pashtus should show you that even b'di'eved you're not yotze. Nukma, you could have established our Mishnah kirabbanan, like the sheet of the Rabbanan, like we just saw in the second brisa. Ve'afilu di'eved namilo. Why were you pushing so hard? If we were to look back up at the Mishnah right now, take a look back up. Nitma basar v'chelev kayim eino zorek esadam. Does that sound like b'di'eved you're yotze? No, of course not. What was bothering Rav in our Mishnah? Just paint the scene. Rav is sitting in Bavel giving a shiur, and he's bothered by this Mishnah. What's wrong? So answers the Gemara, Rav must nisak shise. He had a very difficult time with our Mishnah. Why? Because Amai Tani ein zorek esadam. He was looking at our Mishnah and said, look at the first line of our Mishnah. Nitma basar b'chelev kayam. Why does he say eino zorek esadam? Say pasul. Say the final psak. Say what the deal is. This meat is no longer eligible. Say that it's pasul. That's the Gemara's question back inside, 4 lines before the wide lines. Rav Masnishik, she say, Amai, if you want to say that it's mamish pasul, even b'di'eved, then Tani ein zorek es adam. Amai Tani ein zorek es adam? Why did you write that you should not be zorek es adam? Listening pasul. Write that it's usher to use entirely. Elashma mina, says Rav, by virtue of the fact that it said ein zorek, that's lechatchila. Aval diavad shapir dami. A beautiful, gentle diuk from our Mishnah, says Rav, that because our Mishnah says that the din is ein zorek es adam when the basar is tameh, but it didn't say pasul, we therefore learn from there that b'di'eved, if you're zorek adam when the meat is pasul by the korban pesach, you are yotze. Beautiful. Ula Reb Nassan, what does Reb Nassan do? Reb Nassan says that the achila is not me'akev. Reb Nassan says, what does he do with the pasuk? Ish lefiach lo lamali. What do you get? How can you say that the achila is not ma'akev? It's mufurish a pasuk in the Torah. So says the Gemara, debo'inan gavra dechazi la'achila. No, it's okay if the meat is tameh. That's fine. What's not fine is if the gavra, the ochel, the person who's performing the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, Havas Korban Pesach, if that person is not a gavra that's chazi, if he's not eligible to eat that because of a medical issue, whatever it is, that's when there's a problem. But the food itself being tameh, that's what ish lefi achlo means. The pasuk shot in the pasuk is ish lefi achlo, the gavra himself, he has to be eligible to eat. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, 3 questions about our machlokes, Reb Nosson and the Rabbanan. 3 sources in the Tanoim that require analysis. Says the Gemara, how do each of these 3 Mishnayos hold up to our machlokes between Reb Nosson and the Rabbanan? Man Tana, first of the middle width lines, 4/5 of the way down. Man Tana lahad Tana Rabbanan. Who's the author of the following? Shachto la'ochla. If someone were to do shchita for those who were planning on eating the Korban Pesach, v'zarku damo shelo la'ochla. But when you did the zrikas hadam, you shifted your kavana dafka for those who are shelo la'ochla. Specifically, those people who are not intending on eating. What's the din? The Brisa writes, "Ha-Pesach atzmo kasher ve'adam yotze bo yadecho vaso." That even though the zrikas hadam was done shelo la'ochla, the shchita was perfect. Kanaveshet, great. What was your kavana? Ochla. And then holacha, kabbalah holacha, then you get the zrikas hadam. All of a sudden you're thinking about no one. I specifically want this for no one. The halacha is your yotze. Kima, doesn't that sound like Nema Rab Nasan hi below Rabbanan? That sounds like Rab Nasan, that the achila is not ma'akev. Who cares what happens at the zrikas hadam? Even if you can't eat it, it doesn't make a difference. Because Rab Nasan held that achila is not ma'akev. Maybe this is him, says the Gemara, 3 lines into the middle with lines, 12 lines from the bottom. Afilu tema Rabbanan. Don't worry. We could even say that this is like the Rabbanan because ein machshavas ochlin bizrika. Because the machshava of what the zorik thinks during zrika cannot have impact on food. It's impossible. Halachic mechanism does not work. You can think about whatever you want as it relates to achila, it will not change anything. So therefore, this brisa is not specifically and only according to Reb Nasan. We could even understand it according to the Rabbanan. Let's try another brisa, 4 lines into the wide lines. Man tana lahad tana Rabbanan. Who's the author of the following brisa? Hare shahayachol lebeshas shchita. The person who was supposed to eat it was sick during shchita. V'chalim b'shas zrika, and he healed during the zrika. Or chalim b'shas shchita, or he was sick, or he was healed, he was fine during the shchita, v'chol, and he became sick b'shas zrika. So the halacha is, ein shochlin v'zarkin alav. You're not supposed to do shchita or zrika from the beginning to the end. If you know that he's sick, you should not. Ad shehechalim mishas shchita ad shas zrika. Seems to be that you need to be healthy the whole time. Kiman. That's the opposite of Reb Nasan. It seems to be that it is le'ikuba, that the food is problematic. Nema, maybe we should say Rabbanan hi v'lo Reb Nasan, because Reb Nasan would say, who cares if you can eat it? It's not about that. It's about whether or not you're sick. So maybe that's all the Rabbanan and not Reb Nasan, says the Gemara. Afilu tema Reb Nasan. We could even understand this according to Reb Nasan because, as we said above, Gavra dechazi la'achila ba'inan. Because here, this isn't a problem with the korban. This is a problem with the ochel, with the person. And we know that Reb Nasan is of the opinion that Gavra dechazi la'achila ba'inan, we need the person who is eating it to be, in theory, able to eat. Otherwise, it's not helpful. And that's why in this Mishnah, we need him to be chalim, healthy, mishas shchita, and through the zrika. Let's try again. Third brisa that we're going to ask against our machlokes, not against, but to compare to our machlokes, Reb Nasan and the Rabbanan. 7-8 lines from the bottom. Who holds of the following brisa? Shachto b'tara ve'achar kach nitmu balim. 4 steps, of course, as we know in the process of korban. There's shchita, kabbalah, sadam, halacha, and zrika. There's the slaughtering of the animal, collecting of the blood, walking to the mizbeach, and then actual sprinkling on the mizbeach. So let's say during the shchita, perfect, it was done b'tara. Ve'achar kach nitmu abalim. After the shchita, but before the zrika, the balim become tameh. So the halacha is Yizrak Adam b'tahara, no problem. You can bring the blood. You can be zorek the dam. Ve'al yochal basar b'tuma. But the people should not eat the basar. Why not? We're going to see in a moment. Kiman, who is this Mishnah like? Amar Rabbi Eliezer b'machlokes shnuya. This seems to be similar this seems to be able to be compared to our machlokas in Reb Nassan and the Rabbanon. The Reb Nassan, he seems to be like Reb Nassan, that you can do the Zrikas Adam, but you don't have to eat it. That's perfect because he says Achil is not me'akev. Says the Gemara, hold on one second, maybe not. Rav Yochanan Amar afilu tema Rabbanon. Maybe Ataka is the Rabbanon. Hacha b'mayaskinan. What's going on in this brisa? Really, we're talking about B'tzibur. We're not talking about a yachid here. We're talking about for the tzibur. We're talking about where the tzibur is tameh. De'afilu b'tuma nami avde. You're allowed to you're allowed to do the zrika even if the person's tameh because it's tumas tzibur. And it's tuma hutra b'tzibur or tuma duchuy b'tzibur, as we'll see a little bit more later on today. Says the Gemara, that's fine. If you want to say that the zrikas hadam is fine because of tuma b'tzibur, that explains the part of the brisa that says you can do the zrikas hadam. But this brisa also said you shouldn't eat it. But remember what we said: if tuma is hutra b'tzibur because of if it's tuma haba, if it's pesach haba b'tuma, then you should be able to eat the animal also. So why can you only do the zrikas hadam and not eat the animal? So asks the Gemara, I don't understand. Ibit tzibur, if in fact the person, it was a whole tzibur that became tamei after the shchita and before the zrika, amay ein habasar nechal b'tuma. I don't understand. Why then can't we eat the meat? If it is now a case of pesach haba b'tuma, we should be able to eat the meat. Answers the Gemara, you have to look at the chronology of what happened. Because if you don't, you're going to get in big trouble. And therefore, we have a gzeira derabanan. What happened in our brisa? The shchita took place and everyone was tahor. Then the whole tzibur became tameh. Now we allow the zrika because of the tzibur, but it's technically not pesach haba b'tuma, and therefore you can't eat it in such a case. We're not going to allow you to eat it in that case because let's see what happens here. Gzeira shema yitmu abaylam la'achar zrika. Maybe in another year they're going to become tameh after the zrika, not before. V'yomru, and they'll say ishtakad last year, when we became tameh in between the shchita and the zrika, lo nitmeu v'achalnu, we were considered eligible, we weren't considered tameh, we were allowed to eat. Hashtanami nechal, now that we became tameh after the zrikas hadam, we're allowed to eat. V'lo yaded ishtakad ki izdarik hadam, bailam tmeim hayu. That's different. Last year, when you became tameh in between the shchita and the zrika, pesach haba b'tuma, but hash the bailam tahorim havu. Now you'd have to be mamish a tahor. That's a problem. You were tahor the whole time. You became tameh afterwards. You're mamish aser to eat the meat. So when you become tameh between the shchita and the zrika, we have a gzeira derabana not to eat the meat, lest in the next year, in another year, you become tameh after the zrika, and that doesn't have a din of pesach haba b'tuma and tuma hutra b'tzibur, and that is just completely aser. That brings us to the very top of Ayin Testament Aleph. And at the top of Ayin Testament Aleph, we're going back to Rav where we started today. We gave one answer according to Rav that he was holding like Reb Nassan. So we said in our Mishnah that if the basar is tameh, we're not allowed to do zrikas hadam. And Rav said, don't worry about it. Even if you do it, granted it's b'di'evet, but if you do it, it's still hurtza. Your korban pesach, the zrikas hadam is still good. We gave the answer of Reb Nassan. Now we're going to give a second answer to that. The ibai seima Rav de Amar ki Rabbi Yoshua. Really, Rav, who says that it's hurtza, who says that when the meat is tameh, even when the meat is tameh, that if you still do zrikas hadam, it counts. Whose shita is that? He says that is the shita of Rabbi Yoshua, the Tanya, top line of Ayin Testament Aleph. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Kol hazvachim shebatorah, bein shenitma basar v'chelev kayam, bein shenitma chelev ubasar kayam, zorikes hadam. In regards to Kol zvachim shebatorah, in general, when it comes to korbanos, whether or not it is the basar that is tahor and the meat that, and the chelev that's tameh or vice versa, the halacha is you do zrikas hadam. However, by nazir ve'oseh pesach, when it comes to the korbanos of the nazir, and when it comes to the korban pesach, if nitma chelev ubasar kaim zorikes hadam, but let me just translate that. If nitma chelev, if the fats become tameh and the basar is viable, it's tahor, then zorekes adam. But nitma basar v'chelev kaim, if the basar is tameh, what do we say? Ein zorekes adam. But unlike our Mishnah, look what Rabbi Yoshua adds. V'im zara kurza. It's mamish mufurish brisa. This is a statement directly from the mouth of Rabbi Yoshua. And it is exactly our case. It's a Korban Pesach. The basar is tameh. He says you should not do Zrikas Hadam, but that if you do, it counts. That's Mamish Rav on our Gemara. So when we look back at Rav at the beginning of the Gemara on Chesed Beis, it says, Amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav Im Zarak Hurtza. He's literally quoting Rabbi Yoshua. It's exactly right. Says the Gemara, let's finish up Rabbi Yoshua. We're still in the Brisa there, 7-8 lines down, in Testament Aleph. Nitmu abaylim b'meis lo yizrak. If it becomes tamei meis, you should not do zrikas hadam b'imzarak lo hurta. But if the baylim become tamei meis, then that zrikas hadam would not count. It has to be just the basar being tamei and not the baylim being tamei meis. Good. We're at the 2 dots, 8-9 lines down, in Testament Aleph. Let's continue. B'mukdashin eino kain. We said in our Mishnah that b'mukdashin, that when it comes to most korbanos, it's not the case that when the meat is tamei, you're not allowed to do zrikas hadam, but rather that even if the meat is tamei, you're still allowed to do zrikas hadam. Masnisan money. Who is that like? That's like the brisa that we just saw 5 lines ago. Rabbi Yoshua, the Tanya, Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Kol Azvachim Shabbator Shenishtayer Men Kazayis Basar Kazayis Chelev Zorek Es Adam. The halacha is that with all of the korbanos in the Torah, Kol Zvachim Sheba Torah, whenever there's a kizayis of basar left or a kizayis of chelev, the halacha is you are allowed to do zrikas hadam. What if you have a mixed bag? Kechatzi zayis basar ukechatzi zayis chelev ein zorekas hadam. The halacha is that if you have half of a kizayis of basar and half of a kizayis of chelev, that's not enough to do zrikas hadam. You need a full kizayis of basar or a full kizayis of chelev, but not a mixed bag. It's got to be the right amount of either one. That's true in general with korbanos, but with an ola, things are different still more. Uve ola afilu kechatzi zayis basar kechatzi zayis chelev zorek es hadam ibnei shekula kalil. When it comes to the korban ola, because the whole thing is going up to a Kadosh Baruch Hu anyways, and no one's eating the korban ola. So if the amount of flesh and meat you have left is a half a kazayis of basar and a half a kazayis of the fats, so the halacha, one is allowed to still be zorek es hadam. What's the svara? Halachic svara? Because it's kula kalil. Everything is going up to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Then the Mishnah, seemingly strangely, we're talking about korbanos and zrikas hadam, adds in something totally out of left field. Ube mincha, when it comes to flour, when it comes to korbanos mincha, the halacha is afal pisha kula kayem es lo yizrok. You should not do zrikas hadam. Since when do we do zrikas hadam on flour? Well, there is no blood by flour. What does that even mean? Says the Gemara, mincha maya vitzta. What is this doing here? This has no shaychus to this Mishnah, to this brisa of Rabbi Yoshua. That's fine. You want to talk about zrikas hadam till you're blue in the face? I don't mind. But you're talking about flour. There is no zrikas hadam by flour. So how does the Gemara get out of this? It says the Gemara as follows. Amar Papa, a quarter of the way down, Amar Papa, you're right that many korbanos mincha don't have dam in them. All flour has no dam, but some korbanos mincha are brought in conjunction with korbanos that taka do have blood, actual animals. Amar Papa, minchas nesachin. We're talking about minchas nesachin, and those are korbanos that are brought b'shchita who happen to also have with them a flour donation. Oh, so now let's see what's going on here. Selkadai techamina. I might have thought as follows: Kevan de kaasya mikoach zevach. I might have thought that since the flour is being brought on behalf of the korban, that it has the same din as a korban, that that's not true, that you cannot put up the korban of the korban mincha when it's not a kizayis. Says the Gemara, asks the Gemara, almost a third of the way down, chelev minalan. How do we know that chelev is one of the things in the brisa that Rabbi Yeshua can rely upon to still do zrikas hadam? He said that if you have a kazayis of chelev, that you can still do zrikas hadam. How do we know that? Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shmuel umatu ba mishum Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya da Amar Kra. These great Amoraim brought it from a pasuk, and what's the pasuk? B'ktira chelev the reach nichoach l'Hashem. The chelev is a reach nichoach. Chelev afal pishein basar, but the pasuk still calls it reach nichoach. So we see that that's still befitting before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, as long as the basar, not basar, as long as there's at least one kizayis of chelev, so halacha l'maisa, you can still do zrikas hadam. So it says the Gemara, first of the very long lines, ashkechan chelev. Fine, you've given me a marimakom. Yoseres hakaved ushte kelayos minalan. How do you know that the yoseres hakaved, the diaphragm, ushte alechem, that the shte klayos, that the kidneys minalan? How do we know? Heicha amrinon dezarkinan. How do we know that we do zrikas hadam when this is all that's left over in the shiur of a kizayis? Says the Gemara, midikatani uvemincha. Afal pisha kula kayemes lo yizrok. We make a diuk from our brisa by Rabbi Yoshua. By the brisa Rabbi Yoshua, it says that when it comes to a korban mincha, even one that's connected, of course, that the one that's by the minchas nesach, and even though it's connected to an animal, so there we said that it cannot be brought lo yizrok. Mincha hu delo, so we make a diuk. By the korban mincha, the flour can't be brought, but there are other things that can be brought. Aval yoseres hakavedu shtei aklayos shapir dami. But for this part of the animal, the diaphragm of the animal, shtei aklayos, the kidneys, shapir dami, that is sufficient to use as your kizayis, which would then enable you to be zorek es hadam. Minalan, we give me a mari makom. So Rav Yochanan didei Amar. Rav Yochanan himself is the one who said this. Amar kra lereach nichoach. It's the pasuk that says reach nichoach. Kol she'ata mala lereach nichoach. Anything that is in the category of reach nichoach, even the shtei klayos, even the yoseres hakaved, anything that's begeder reach nichoach counts toward the shiur of zrikas hadam. V'itzrich lemichtav chelev. V'itzrich lemichtav reach nichoach. We need to have explicitly stated both cases of chelev and cases of reach nichoach, because we could have thought the chelev was part of reach nichoach. Why did we need both? Says the Gemara halfway down. Because of rachmana chelev, if the Torah had only written chelev, that chelev is included in regards to measuring whether or not we can do the zrikas hadam, and havamina chelevin, but yoseres hakavedu shtei klayos lo, I might have thought that maybe it was only the chelev, because the Torah was explicit about only one thing, chelev. Maybe chelev and not other things, not the yoseres hakaved and not the shtei klayos. Therefore, kasav rachman l'reach nichoach, to be inclusive of the yoseres hakaved and the shtei klayos, that we know that those two go toward the shiur of whether or not one can be zorek es hadam. The kasav rachman l'reach nichoach, but had the Torah only stipulated that which is reach nichoach is allowed to be that which causes for zrikas hadam, so havamina. I might have thought that even the korban mincha would be included in that category, because that's reach nichoach, but we had to exclude that. So therefore, we brought the case, strangely, we brought the case of chelev to exclude mincha, because mincha is reach nichoach too. So we needed both chelev and reach nichoach in order to make sure we were left with the right information at the end, that mincha is not one of the things that can be a gorim for zrikas hadam. However, the chelev and the shtei klayos and the yoseres hakaved, those things are all together reach nichoach. Beautiful. That brings us to our next Mishnah, almost 2/3 of the way down, Ayin Tes Amud Aleph. This Mishnah helps us to learn a little bit more about Pesach haba b'tumah. When do we enter the phase of Pesach haba b'tumah? When do we enter the phase of saying that we are going to need to bring this korban b'tumah? And we can stop worrying about making sure all the kelim are tahor. How do we determine this? It says the Mishnah as follows: Nitma kahal o rubo. If the whole kahal becomes tameh, or the majority of that kahal becomes tameh, o shahayu hakohanim tameim, or if all of the kohanim were tameim ve'akal tahorim, even if the people were tahor, yasu b'tumah. Then we've broken the threshold, and that year will be a Pesach haba b'tumah, and things are a totally different ballgame. That's Pesach haba b'tumah. Nitma miuta kahal. However, if only a portion of Klal Yisrael became tameh, then hatahorin osin es harishon. That let's say that 49% of the kahal became tameh. So then the 51% will bring the korban beito vizmano. That tameh and the 49% osin es hasheni. We don't say Pesach haba b'tumah when it's 49%. Now the number that we have yet to speak about is mechza al nechza. What do we do when it's mamish 50-50? That's a very detailed case. Got to take a whole survey monkey to figure out who's doing what. But let's say we knew. Let's say there's only 10 people in town. 5 are tameh, 5 are tar. This Mishnah doesn't discuss that. And the Gemara at the bottom of the page is going to get into a serious diyun about that. Yirtzeh Hashem will get there in a couple of minutes.
I guess it'd be machmir.
3 shitas in the Amoraim. And 3 brisas to match those 3 shitas in the Amoraim. So the way things are going, we're going to hit Mara before that happens. Tanu Rabbanan. The brisa is quoted in the Gemara. If the Jewish people, all of them were tameh, and the kohanim and the klishares, the kohanim and the utensils were all tahor, or shahayu Yisrael tahorin, all the Jews were fine, but the kohanim and klishares tamein. If any of the 3, Jews, Kohanim, Klishares, if any of them are Tameh, and the Jewish people with the caveat that it's Rov, so then Yasu B'tumah, then that year, what we would then say is Pesach Haba B'tumah She'ein Korban tzibur chaluk. We don't split up the tzibur at that point. Everyone's considered to be one unit. Once it's 51% Jews who are tamei, then everyone's considered to be Pesach haba b'tumah. Amar Rav Chizda says, Lo shanu ela shenitma hasakin b'tmei meis. This is only true when the knife becomes tamei with a tamei mace, because we learned this din. The Rachmana Amar bechalal cherev. The pasuk writes in Sefer Dvarim. The pasuk writes in Sefer Bamidbar. Yep, the pasuk writes in Sefer Bamidbar that if metal becomes tamei from a tamei mace, then the metal is an equivalent to the avatuma. That's what we learned. Hare cherev harehu kechalal. Then the metal which it touched, the blade, it's as if it is the corpse. It's mamish and avatuma. The kametama legaver the meikar. It's going to make the person tamei when he holds a knife. Kimis aved betumas aguf the karis kame aved. And you're standing there as a kohen. You're mamish tamei mace in the mikdash. That's an isser karis. That's not allowed. Aval nitma hasakin betumas sheretz. But had the blade only become tamei betumas sheretz, just with the tuma of one of the Shmona Shvatzim, yes, it makes the animal tamei. That's true. However, legavra lo metamyale, but it won't make the kohen tamei. It's not halal cherev. So then tehorin avid, tamein lo avid. That would be considered a case where if the kli sharetz was tamei because of a kli sharetz, then we would say that's not a problem of kli sharetz, where we would say it's pesach haba b'tuma, but rather we can continue as normal, tamein lo avid. It is not pesach haba b'tuma. What's the svara? Mutav, and this language is very difficult. The Rishonim have a hard time with this language of mutav. Mutav, it's better. Ye'achel, that they should eat betumas basar bilav, that they should eat meat that's only tamei bilav, namely that it's only tamei because of the tumas sheretz of the blade that became tamei. Ve'al yochal basar betumas aguf shu bekares. Alma, what do we see from here? Kasavar Rav Chizda tuma dechuyahu betzibur. From this language of mutav, it's better, the lesser of the two evils. It's better that if you're going to eat meat in a year that's pesach haba betuma, that it's dechuya language. It's not like heter language, and because it's dechuya language, we assume of Rav Chizda that he holds that tuma is not hutra on Pesach, but rather tuma is dechuya. It's b'diavad. It's nebach. What can we do? People are tamei, but we have a Torah. What am I supposed to do? I got to bring a korban. Fine. Rav Yitzchak. Tuma dechuya hi betzibur, and Rabbi Yitzchak seems to agree with Rav Chizda as well that tuma is not hutra, but tuma is dechuya. The Rava Amar afilu tmei nami avde, that even with the knife that is betumas sheretz, that you're going to also be pesach haba betuma. My taima dichsiv, because the pasuk writes ve'abasar asher yiga bechol tamei. This is talking about tuma lo yachel ba'ishi saref. And then it speaks about the habasar, about the meat. The habasar kol tahor yochal basar kol hecha. Wherever it is the case that the following is true, the lo karinan bay, where we don't apply the habasar asher yiga bechol tamei lo yeachel. Wherever the meat is not tamei, lo karinan bay v'habasar kol tahor yochal basar. Then we don't say that it has to be brought betara, because that's how Pesach haba b'tuma is established. But kol hecha de karinan bay, wherever we do say the habasar asher yiga b'chol tamei lo yeachel, wherever we do say that the basar is tamei, then karinan bay v'habasar kol tahor yeachel basar. Then it has to be then it should be done b'tahara. So that is how Rava understands our Gemara, that it should even be done as Pesach haba b'tuma. Now we're going to get to the case of 50-50. Our Mishnah said that if rov people are tamei, it's Pesach haba b'tuma, and if a miut of people are tamei, that it's not Pesach haba b'tuma. What do we do when it's 50-50? Itmar, 6 lines, 5 lines from the bottom. Ayin Testament Aleph. Harei shahayu Yisrael mechza tahorin mechza tzmein. What do we do if it's 50-50? It seems like there's 2 sheets. We'll soon see that there's 3. Rav Amar mechza al mechza kirov. We have no idea what that means. Half and half is like majority. Which half is like majority? We don't know what that means yet. Rav Kahana Amar mechza al mechza eino kirov. Seems like a simple machlokas. Let's get into it. 4 lines from the bottom. Rav Amar mechza al mechza kirov. When Rav says that it's 50-50 and we say that it's a majority, what does that mean? So Rav says each one is treated like a majority. How so? Halalu osin la'atzman. Those who are tahor are treated like the majority. Yodalad b'nisan, they bring their korban, no problem at all. Ve'halalu osin la'atzman, and the other half, the tmein, they also bring it on their own. They're also treated like the rov. So it's as if both are considered the majority. Very, very complex answer in Lamdus, because that also means that half the crowd is Pesach haba b'tuma and half the crowd is not. So there would be different halachic statuses for for each of those groups. That's a very strange answer. Rav Kahana Amar, Mechza al Mechza Eino Karov. What does he mean when he says 50-50 is not like the majority? He means as follows. Tehorin Osin Es Harishon. V'tmeyin Osin Es Hasheni. Wow. He says that those that are Tehorin, those people, they bring the Korban B'Yudalid. Yeah, they bring it on time. But the Tmeyin, the people who are Tameh, they're problematic. They are treated like a minority in that they cannot bring it on Yud Daled because everyone else is tahor. They're treated like a minority, and therefore the Tmein Osin Es Hasheni, the people would have to then push off 1 month to the next month to therefore bring the Korban Pesach on Yom Tov on Pesach Sheni. Ika de Amre, however, there's another version of Rav Kahana which presents a third sheet in the Amoraim. We have Rav number 1 who says that everybody brings on Yud Daled of Nisan. We have Rav Kahana number 1 who says that the people who are Tahorin bring it on Yud Daled, the people who are Tmein bring it on Pesach Sheni. Ika de Amre, there are those who say that Amar Rav Kahana Mechza Eino Karov. What did he mean? Tahorin Osin Es Harishon. Yes, it's correct. Those who are Tahor do bring on Yud Daled. However, and this is a very unique shita, says the Gemara in the name of the Ika de Amre of Rav Kahana B'Tmein Ein Osin Lo Es Harishon V'Lo Es Hasheni. This is a crazy shita. If you have a minority of people that have become tamei, they are not allowed to bring their korban pesach on Pesach Sheni. That's what Rav Kahana would hold in the Ika de Amri. The Rishon, why couldn't they bring in the first case? Because lo avdi lo havu ruba. Because the rove of people were tahor. Relative to them, the rove of people were tahor. So that doesn't work for them. They can't bring it. B'sheni lo avdi de lo havu miyuta. Because they weren't even the miyut, so they can't bring it all. So the Gemara here is going to be troubled by a couple of elements of our Mishnah. Now, you can already anticipate that if our Mishnah spoke about rov, it's going to make a diuk about half. And if it spoke about miyut, it's also going to make a diuk about half. So maybe not all the parts of our Mishnah shtim so well. Let's start with some of the questions. 3 lines down, Ayin Testament Beis says the Gemara. Tanan, the Mishnah writes, our Mishnah, Nitma kahal, if the whole Jewish people become tamei, o rubo, or the majority of them become tamei, or o shahewa kohanim tameim ve'akal tahorim, or the kohanim are the ones who are tamei, but the people were fine. The halacha is yaseh betuma, that they should make pesach haba betuma. Ruba, who here's the diuk, ruba who de'avde betuma. When it's a rove, that's when we say it's pesach haba betuma. However, Aval palga upalga lo avde berishon. It seems then that if it's 50-50, that they would not be the same halacha, and that's kashya the Rav, because Rav says that everyone should bring the korban pesach on your dalit. But if you make an inference from our Mishnah that rov is the rules of our Mishnah, but that implies that palga upalga would not work, so then Rav is up a creek. That doesn't work for him. So then how would Rav answer that? Amar lach Rav, don't worry. I have got pshat in our Mishnah, says Rav, 5-6 lines down, in Testament Beis. Rav says, Amar lach Rav, Ruba avde kulhu betuma, that the major when our Mishnah says that Ruba, that the majority of people they are going to be avde betuma, that they're going to have a Pesach haba betuma. Palga upalga, then is the inference about palga upalga? So it says, Rav, you just made the incorrect diuk. Halalu osin la'atzman, v'halalu osin la'atzman. No, they can all do their own thing. You just made the wrong diuk in our Mishnah. The rove there doesn't mean that 50-50 is a 0 on that day. It just means that each group does their own thing. And in fact, says the Gemara, Hachanami mistabra, I can prove to you, says Rav, that that's pshat in our Mishnah. Because Diktani Seifa, because the end of our Mishnah says as follows: Nitma miut hakahal. If only a few people became tamei, then tahorin osin es harishon. Then tahorin, there are going to be tahorin osin es harishon. The people who are tahor would do the korban pesach on Yud Daled Nisan. Utmei, and those who are tamei osin es hasheni, they would do pesach sheni. Miut hu de'avde b'sheni. Only when there's a small group of people are they avdei b'sheni, are they going to be pushed off to Pesach Sheni. Aval palga upalga, if there's 50 people in the city, 25 on each side of the fence, tahor and tamei, so then you would absolutely not. Ve'avdei b'rishon, they would do everything on the first day. Ve'halalu osin la'atzman, ve'halalu osin la'atzman. So the Gemara says, you tried to ask a question on Rav. Rav says, I'll bring you a raya from the Seifa to my own shita. So if that's the case, if our Mishnah is now like Rav, that poses a problem for Rav Kahana. If you just explained our Mishnah like Rav, and Rav was trying to learn from our Mishnah. So then Rav Kahana has a big problem because our Mishnah is now like Rav and not like Rav Kahana. So that's why the Gemara says, we're not quite going to get to the end of the page. We'll stop in a few lines just to make sure we have a clean stopping point for the night. Ve'alakasha Rav Kahana. If our Mishnah is like Rav, that both the Tahorim and the Tamein are treated like a robe, and each of them are going to do their korbanos on Yudalid Nisan, then how does that work for Rav? Because Rav in either of his versions doesn't say that. In one version, Rav says that the Tamein did their korban on Pesach Sheni. And in another version, he says they didn't do it at all. But he certainly doesn't hold like the way that Rav understood our Mishnah, that the Tamein would do their korban on Pesach Rishon, on Yudalid. That's for sure not. So how does Rav answer? Amar lach Rav, you misunderstood the Mishnah. Amar lach Rav Kahana, excuse me. Rav Kahana said, you misunderstood our Mishnah. He says, Nitmu miut kahal. What does it mean in our Mishnah when it says that there's a small group of people who are tamei, tahor and osnes harishon, utmein osnes hasheni? That's absolutely still true, what I would say. And this is version 1 of Rav Kahana, that the tahorim would, of course, do their korban on Pesach Rishon, and the tmein would push off just a little bit. Hapalga upalga tahor and osin es harishon aval tmein ein an osin lo es harishon velo es hasheni. No, I can still make the same exact diuk in that Mishnah. There's no reason Rav is not territorial here. There's no reason why I can't learn the Mishnah the way that I want to. Machlokes amorai between Rav and Rav Kahana as to how to understand the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, that diuk is fine, but you, Rav Kahana, have a problem with your own two shitas. Hatenach lelishna basra de Rav Kahana. That only works according to the second version of Rav Kahana, who says that the Tmein never bring the korban ever, not even on Pesach Sheni. Hatenach lelishna basra de Rav Kahana. Elalahach lishna da amar Rav Kahana tahorim osin es harishon utmein osin es hasheni. But according to the first version of Rav Kahana, that one is in fact obligated as a tamei to bring it on Pesach Sheni. He's not canceled forever. He's just obligated to bring it on Pesach Sheni. Then the diuk that you just made does not work. Ma'ika lemeimar. How then would you understand our Mishnah? We're back to another question on Rav Kahana. So we're going to do this answer, and we're going to stop in 3 or 4 lines so everyone can make mar of those who need to make it. Amar lach Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana would say, Hu adin, I could make another diuk that still fits within the Mishnah. Hu adin de afilu palga upalga nami. Tahorin osenes harishon utmein osenes hasheni. It all works out perfectly. What do you do with the diuk of miut? So says the Gemara, I de katani miut hakahal. I did tana resha rubo tananami seifa miuto. You thought that the word miut in the Mishnah was meant to be inferred from. You're incorrect. It was only there for structural purposes. That since the resha used the word rov, we wanted to contrast with the word miut. So tomorrow we're going to start from Tanya Kavase, which is 3 brisas in a row that support the 3 shitas that we saw in the Tanaim. We asked the question, what about Mechza? Mechza, we saw Rav Kahana 1 and Rav Kahana 2. And tomorrow we'll start right here with Tanya Kavase de Rav to learn the brisas that support all 3 of those shitas. Wishing you all a beautiful night.